You know, some of the best movies of all time, they come in trilogies. And it's not too often that the good guys happen to win in the first two. I'm just saying. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, John Delray, reviewing Packers versus Lions the day after. We've had a little bit of time now, right? Another nail biter, another week, another nail biter for the Green Bay Packers. But it's just kind of the way the team is this year, always taking it down to the end, something that we are certainly going to talk about today as we kind of go over what were the highlights, what were the players that stood out, and then the lowlights in the loss. So before we really get to that, I do just want to give my overall thoughts on the game. And ultimately, it's that the Green Bay Packers are a very, very good football team. We know that. That is true. It can also be true at the same time that while being a very, very good football team, they are, right now, pretty outclassed by the Lions, because that does appear to be true as well. So don't get me wrong, were the Packers on the wrong side of a number of what are controversial calls? 1,000% yes. But I would also say that the Lions were probably the more physical team last night. Ultimately, in the moments where you just had to have it, the Lions did better than the Packers did. They got the yards when they needed them. The Packers didn't always. So does that mean in a potential third matchup that there's no path to victory? No, absolutely not. All of these things can be true. The Lions may be one level up from the Packers. The Packers may be a very good team. And there still absolutely could be a path to victory in a third time around. Now, if you believe that that's delusional, hey, look, Packers got better from matchup 1 to matchup 2. 1% better. Matchup 3 looks pretty darn decent. So while it was kind of a tough loss to swallow, ultimately, the Packers did show to everyone that they can hang with anyone. Now they just got to get over that mountaintop at least once, right? So before we really dive into shoutouts and getouts, just 3 quick little notes here, just some news for you. 1, details haven't exactly trickled out yet, but in terms of injured rookie nickel corner safety Javon Bullard, he was seen last night in a boot and on crutches. Then it was announced this morning that he was going to be getting an MRI today to see just how extensive the damage was on that ankle. I have not seen much reported yet about the results of that MRI, so we're still waiting on news for Javon Bullard. Number 2, in terms of playoff seeding, the division is now pretty safely out of reach for the Packers. It looks almost certain that they're going to slide into one of those wildcard spots, be it seeds 5, 6, 7. As it stands right now, yes, an unequal number of games, but as it stands right now, they are the 6th seed, which would put them on the road to Seattle for the first round of the playoffs, which just happens to be the exact matchup that we're getting next Sunday for Sunday Night Football. So perhaps a playoff preview there. And then number 3, I just want to say too, again, as an overall note, not so much news related, just wanted to get this out there and it didn't fit really anywhere else. Edgerrin Cooper and Jair Alexander are going to feel like absolute revelations for this defense when they're actually back. You're going to hear me talk about some of the defensive woes today, some of the things that went wrong for the defense. I just want you to keep in mind the framing. Like if you could add a couple of players out there right now to really help shore up what are their weaknesses, Edgerrin Cooper and Jair Alexander, the way they're playing there this year, they kind of come to mind about exactly what portions of this defense are missing. If they also could throw in prime Reggie White, it would help, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. All right, so let's get to it. We're going to do the get outs first, as we customarily do following a loss. It's just that get out number 1 doesn't happen to go to any Green Bay Packer. Get out number 1 goes to the refs. Okay, so let's just get this out of the way. And I'm not going to dwell on this forever. And the refs are not the only reason that the Packers lost this game. Don't think that I'm going to dwell on this and say, like, oh, that's screwed. No, I'm not going to. But what I am going to say is that what the refs did absolutely contributed to this loss for the Green Bay Packers. Keyshawn Nixon, man, still being held on that last play, right? Anytime you see a blitzer streaking and then get pulled backward, it generally is a fair indication of holding. The refs just disagreed. Hopefully Xavier McKinney's face is okay after he got hands to the face. Hopefully all of Jordan Love's body is okay. Definitely his ankle, since that got illegally twisted the last time Detroit and Green Bay matched up. Oh, yeah, and the refs forgot that one, too. And Quay Walker, he, to his credit, actually shoved a player this time. So, kind of an attaboy for that one. But unfortunately, he was the second one to do pushing. And I know Dan Skipper is a very round human, but that doesn't excuse him having to become a giant snowball, getting tipped over easily by Quay Walker. Oh, yeah. And then Christian Watson getting called for offensive pass interference. I said last night on the watch party that I didn't want to blame that one too quickly, at least, because from the angle they were showing on the telecast, maybe from the side, like Watson stepped into it. No. We see now from basically every angle that that was crap. I mean, I guess if you want to get super technical with the rule, as Dan Orlovsky pointed out, Christian Watson was about a half yard deeper than where he's allowed to bump. And then, of course, you're getting into the argument of did he mean to bump it? Was it incidental contact? Did the defender slide into Watson? A whole bunch of things that you only make that call if you're seemingly positive about every single one of those things. And yet I don't see any way that every single one of those things can be proven. Especially considering, as Orlovsky pointed out, that the time gap from contact to flag thrown was nearly the duration of the entire play. It's not like the flag got thrown right as Watson made contact. No, it was contact, run, pass to Jacobs, caught in the end zone. Oh, there's the flag. Not really sure I can get with that. And there were a bunch of other calls. Yes, the Lions benefited from a couple calls going Green Bay's way. So let's just put this under the whole category of the refs last night were not great. But it certainly seemed to harm Green Bay more so than the other side. Is it the only reason for the loss? Absolutely not. It didn't help at all. Number 2, the middle of the defense. Now this one's actually self-inflicted. This one falls on the Packers. Think back just a couple weeks ago. Right? They had a lot of success against San Francisco defensively, but one area where they kind of got stagnant in the middle of the game especially was their backup quarterback was able to just kind of pepper the middle of the field with these intermediate passes. Okay, now last week with Miami, Tua put up huge numbers in what was a loss for Miami. How did he do it? Peppering over the field with Jonnu Smith a lot. Yeah, you're kind of picking up on a trend here. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, obviously saw that that's the way the Packers defense was trending. And he said, oh, yeah, they also, because they can't cover the intermediate. And then when they do back up to cover the intermediate, then they can't cover a screen to save their lives. So I'm just going to spam the crap out of both of those concepts. And they're not going to be able to really cover either one. And he wound up being right. When targeting the middle of the field from 0 to 20 yards out, Jared Goff was a total of 16 for 21 for 157 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. To focus in on that, we're going to do a layered approach here to really kind of focus in on that. The 3 starting linebackers last night, Quay Walker, Eric Wilson, Isaiah McDuffie, they were targeted a total of 16 times. For those 16 targets, Jared Goff was 16 of 16 for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. All right, now let's get more narrow than that. Let's take out Quay, because while Quay gave up 3 of those completions, I do have to say from looking at it, Quay was probably still the best one in coverage, right? He also gave up the fewest receptions. So let's just focus in on Wilson and McDuffie. Take out Quay, those numbers become 13 of 13 for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now let's get even more narrow and look at just McDuffie, who has been playing way better against the run over the course of the last couple of weeks. However, over the last 2 weeks per Acme Capping Company, Isaiah McDuffie alone has given up over 20 catches on 23 targets for a grand total of 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. One more stat, just to give you further context. Theo Ash, he put this out there. Last week, the Packers gave up 28 completions between the numbers. This week, 23. 2 weeks in a row of at least 23. No other team in the NFL has allowed more than 23 in any single game this year. Ain't that a happy little stat for you? It's almost like 3 weeks ago. The Packers looked at their scheme, looked at their personnel, and specifically looked at their linebacker room and said, hey, we're getting gashed against the run. We're done with this. Another year of this? No, we can't do it. Linebackers, I want you to start crashing. I really want you to focus on stopping the run. And then they did it marvelously against McCaffrey. They did it great against Achane. They even did it pretty well last night against Detroit. But now what's happening is they're crashing forward and completely leaving the gap open behind their coverage responsibilities. And good quarterbacks are just peppering the crap out of it, and it's killing the defense. Until they actually close off that portion of the field, they're just going to keep getting slaughtered. And by the way, I mentioned screens earlier. Goff last night, 7 of 7 for 57 yards. Not a bad guaranteed play to have sitting in your arsenal when you only need a couple yards, right? All right, so now for get out number 3, I'm just going to rattle off some quicker ones. These are a bunch of just straight up not good enoughs. Number 1, let's go pass rush. Ultimately, the Packers mustered 14 pressures, and while that in and of itself, it's not terrible, right? They were mostly the empty type of pressures that didn't really affect the quarterback. Not being able to cover the intermediate of the field and not getting enough pressure on the QB, that's a really good way to allow a quarterback to have a really good day against you. Lions took advantage, and it's probably the biggest reason why the Lions won this game. Next, the opening of the game. 31 passing yards in the opening half. Stop me if you've heard this before. Packers, especially against division opponents, they come out stale with an offense that just doesn't work, especially the passing game. Everything looks a little out of sync. Maybe Jordan's a little off. Maybe there's a drop, whatever. It's just not syncing up right. Defense gives up some quick yards. They at least allow a field goal on the board, sometimes a touchdown. Then in the second quarter, the Packers settle in a little bit, get to a more structured game plan, right? And they at least chip away into the early deficit. And then all of a sudden, the third quarter, the Packers come out invigorated. Now they have urgency. They're playing from behind. They put up a bunch of points. All of a sudden, it looks like there's a chance. Then the fourth quarter goes back and forth until you get to the final minutes, and then a winner is ultimately decided. Doesn't that kind of sound like dang near every single game this year? Yeah, and they did it again. If the Packers can start playing the first quarter like they do the third, well, then they absolutely, unequivocally can beat anyone. So I don't know if it's the opening 15 that's written out by LaFleur. Last night, I'll tell you, against the Detroit front seven, how injury depleted they were. I didn't love the first drive where they just wanted to come out slinging. I understand the first play they were looking for a deep shot, but man, it felt an awful lot like Jordan Love was throwing the ball way too much in quarter number 1 against a defense that was playing dudes who were unemployed a week ago or guys on other practice squads. Yeah, that's what they went with. So, just on the whole, I don't know if it's a scripting problem. I don't know if they don't stretch enough in pregame. I don't know. But the Packers have this habit of coming out stale, being the exact opposite of a quick start team that we would hope for a young athletic team. Fall behind and then they battle back. If they just got to stop waiting to play the third quarter to actually reach their potential. Next up in the not good enough category, the offensive line. They were credited with 13 pressures allowed. Only one more pressure allowed than Detroit's offensive line was credited with. Did it really feel that way, though? Because it felt an awful lot like Jared Goff had time and Jordan Love was running for his life. Why in the world are the Packers routinely getting pushed back by these backups of Detroit's front seven? Even Zach Tom got pushed back multiple times, which is just something you just don't see from Zach Tom often. Eventually, they did settle in a bit, but this might have been the offensive line's worst performance of the year. And it's a really, really bad time for that. Next up, Eric Stokes. This is more eye test than anything. The numbers from last night weren't terrible, but it's got to stop. He's just so getting burned so often. He gave up a touchdown catch last night. One of the passes his way was a drop that he really didn't do anything with. It's just getting to the point where you've got to root for drops when you see Stokes as the targeted corner because he's going to be so far away from the receiver. It's getting rough. Like the Jair, if he can come back, it's going to help a lot, obviously, because then that probably means Stokes is off the field. But man, Stokes, it's just not working at this point. And then one very, very last one in the get out category. One target for Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed, Packers leading receiver. One target, of which he dropped that one target. It's like, yeah, that sucks. But still, one target for Jaden Reed. Especially in a game without Romeo Doubs. That just can't happen. All right, shout-outs. Let's flip the script. Let's go to the positive side of things. And let's start off, honestly, let's go to Quay Walker. I know I mentioned the coverage numbers weren't great, but look, over the last 3 weeks, this is a whole new Quay. 3 weeks, 3 overall pretty great games from him. It's the urgency he's playing with now, what we're actually beginning to see. And what we were saying all year was like the athleticism's not in doubt, and he's a good tackler, but my God, the man can't read an offense. He's slow to decision make, etc., etc. All of a sudden, the athleticism and urgency, the decision making, they're actually kind of beginning to marry. No one is going to confuse him with prime time Patrick Willis, Luke Kuechly, no. But the version of Quay Walker they've gotten over the last 3 weeks, especially against the run, pretty darn good. Last night per PFF's tracking, I wound up with a total of 10 tackles. Only one miss. Again, missed tackle percentage under 10%, which he routinely is at. It's good stuff from Quay Walker. Feels weird to say it, but like, no, it's true. It's 3 weeks in a row now. One little thing, though, I still wonder about him wearing the green dot. Wouldn't everyone just feel more comfortable if it were X? Gotta at least say that. Next up, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson. They caught the ball. Yeah, I know Watson has like the best drop numbers on the team, even after his deep ball drop a couple weeks ago, but he caught a deep ball. And Wicks caught it at all. Like this was actually a really strong performance from these two. Fold in Tucker Kraft too, if you want to. But those receivers did some great work last night. Between Wicks and Watson, a combined of 4 catches each, so a total of 8 catches, 163 yards. 5 of their 8 catches went for first downs, and 0 drops between the two. Dare I say that this was the Dontavian Wicks resurgence game? Maybe he can be counted on in the offense now. As it was pointed out on the watch party last night, that very first drive play to Wicks, that early one, just get him an early completion, get him something in his hands, get it moving that way. Hey, maybe there's something to it, because it seemed to work. Next up, let's go to Zane Anderson. Zane Anderson, when you think of him, he doesn't play defense. In fact, if I were to say to you before this game, Zane Anderson's coming in on defense, the first thought might be, oh no. I understand the man had a good training camp. But historically speaking, you just don't want Zane on defense. He's a special teams ace. He's a good one at that. But that's what he does. That is his job. You do not cross streams on this one. Well, last night, he did both. A total of 53 snaps last night on defense. Coming into this game, he had a career number of 8 defensive snaps. Now, in those 53 snaps last night, he was not targeted in coverage at all. He had 3 total tackles, no misses, and one of those 3 was a massive, gotta have it, run stop for a loss on a late down, late in the game. Like, for a guy who really hadn't played defense at all, forced into action by injuries, you wouldn't have really known that he was out of place last night. He played really, really well, all things considered. And considering that, the Packers, we got to see what happens with Evan Williams, right? We got to see how that protocol comes along. We got to see what's going on with that MRI of Javon Bullard. Having another guy that you could potentially count on to play safety, that could be big for Green Bay over the next couple of weeks. I will say, I'm not looking at Zane after that performance and saying he's got to be an every week starter. What I am saying is to have another guy you can count on, that's great. Now, in terms of when Jair returns, this is kind of a separate outside note, but I did want to make sure to say it. It's going to be interesting to see how they kind of shift the secondary now. Let's say, hypothetically, Bullard does have to miss some time with an ankle injury, right? So if Evan Williams can come back, probably you've got McKinney and Williams at safety, and then at corners, if Jair can return, you probably slide Nixon back to the slot so that you can get Valentine on the field and go Jair, Valentine, Nixon in the slot. And then if Bullard's able to come back healthy, now all of a sudden, what does that look like? Is Nixon starting opposite Jair? Now that even Valentine's fully healthy and playing pretty well? All right, it's going to be interesting to see which way this goes, as hopefully they can get some healthy guys back. All right, and then the last 1/2 here. Last shout out, second half Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs. I just put them here because honestly, from both of them, it's more of the same. And if you want to put first half Jordan Love in the get out category, I get it. I know he was running for his life, but he wasn't perfect. But in the second half, again, when he's on, he makes throws that very, very few quarterbacks can. Look at that pressured completion, contested catch to Christian Watson for no further evidence. Not many QBs are making that throw. And in half 2 last night, again, for another stretch, he was incredibly efficient. Another game with no turnovers for Jordan Love. Not even a single turnover-worthy play as defined by PFF. So, first half, leaving a lot to be desired. Second half, though, it's the special stuff of Jordan Love. They just have to get it out of him all game. And then lastly, Josh Jacobs. Anytime you get a hat trick of touchdowns, you get yourself a shout out. Plus, it should have been a 4-touchdown game, if not for a very inconvenient and ill-timed offensive pass interference call on Christian Watson. So Josh Jacobs, no, the yards per carry was not brilliant, but against Detroit, a hat trick and churning out the tough yards when they needed them, you take it. All right, everybody, thank you so much. I will see you next week. Keep in mind the Packers are now on like their mini bye coming off of this Thursday. So you'll see me again early next week. And then next week with a Sunday game, we actually return to like a typical Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. All right, everybody, do hope you have an absolutely fantastic weekend. And as always, go Pack, go.